The 2015 IndyCar Finale at Sonoma saw 6 drivers mathematically eligible to win the championship. Juan Pablo Montoya has led the points the entire season since winning the first race in St. Petersburg, and it seemed like his 34-point margin over Graham Rahal and 47 points over Scott Dixon, who was in third, would seem to be enough to just have a solid day and close this thing out. However, that would not be the case. As the final race of the season, double points were awarded. So essentially, instead of getting 50 for a win, you would get 100. IndyCar also awarded 1 point for leading a lap and 2 bonus points if you led the most laps in the race, and that would be very important. Will Power, who is 4th in the standing, 61 points back going into this race, was definitely more of a long shot, but he did get a bonus point right off the bat for scoring the pole position. Elio Castroneves and Joseph Newgarden were also eligible to win the championship, but it was a real long shot. And although this was a huge day for IndyCar to crown a champion and have a massive celebration for the sport, the race did have a pretty big dark cloud over it, as just the previous week it was the race where Justin Wilson was tragically killed at Pocono. So that made things emotionally difficult for the teams going into this weekend, and especially the drivers, as they lost one of their friends. Even though it was double points, all Montoya had to do was finish on the podium and he would lock up the championship. Graham Rahal would have to win the race with Montoya finishing 4th or worse, and Scott Dixon, who was further back, would need to win the race and Montoya finished 6th or worse. Will Power would lead the field to the green flag.
As they pack up, they grid up. We're ready to go racing for the final time in honor of the late Justin Wilson. It's the Indy Grand Prix of Sonoma. It's the championship decider. It's time to bring the action. Will Power, look at Hunter Ray on the inside of Newgarden. He goes for it. Rahal sweeps around the outside. They climb the hill into this turn, this tricky turn 2, and everybody through cleanly.
And what a great start for Juan Pablo Montoya. He's in 4th. Somebody's looking up the inside there. That's Kimball, but Montoya makes it through clean. That is huge for his championship hopes.
Look at Rahal on the inside, trying to get through. Rahal sideways. He gets hit by Andretti. It's a rough and tumble through turn 4, but he gathers it up. Andretti's through.
Possibility he might have got tire damage. He's got swarmed by everybody. That was a real early start by Will Power. Probably caught Graham off guard, and he just got swallowed up by 4 or 5 cars.
He was in the thick of it with Dixon and Kanaan. Here he goes up to turn 7 to make a move on Andretti, on Marco, and does it. It's a good inside move, and he pulls it off.
I don't know about that. Marco was hanging tough on the outside, but ran out of road.
It was contact early on, too, with the 22 of Simon Pagenaud.
It was a great start for Juan Pablo Montoya, but his nearest championship rival, Graham Rahal, had a pretty rough go at the beginning of the race.
Board now with Graham, and Montoya's next to him.
And Hunter Ray, Paul, got a great start ahead of Montoya. That opened things up for Juan.
See Charlie Kimball slid up the outside there. Look at this on the outside of Pagenaud. So a really aggressive. Oh, look at that, banging wheels with Dixon. So that's look at that.
And then Kanaan lined up for a shot. He was through on the inside. Just up ahead of Graham through this turn was where there was contact with Pagenaud, and Marco Andretti is about to come flying through on the inside of Graham Rahal and muscle his way through. There he goes.
And guys, the benefit of being a multi-car team, if you're Graham Rahal, you have nobody to help here. As we see out the back, I believe, of Charlie Kimball, there's Graham and Dixon next to each other. You're going to see light wheel-to-wheel contact. Little rubbity rub, no big deal.
Things would eventually start to settle down, and the leaders would make their first green flag pit stops on lap 14. Some drivers would choose to run much longer, but by the time everything was cycled through and everyone made their pit stop, Will Power would end up back in the lead. And Joseph Newgarden, who was running in the 2nd spot right behind Will Power, had this close call with Simon Pagenaud as he was exiting his pit stall. 30 laps into the race, Will Power was still leading Joseph Newgarden, but Scott Dixon, who started in 9th, has now worked his way up to the 3rd spot, while Montoya was in 5th. But still, that was a pretty good margin over Scott Dixon in terms of points. The first full course caution of the race would come out on lap 33 as the 20 car of Luca Felipe was slow on track. The result of this yellow would bring all the leaders down pit road, and the Target Chip Ganassi team of Scott Dixon would have a monster stop and get their driver out of the pits first. In order for Scott Dixon to win this championship, they would have to have a near perfect day, and his drive up through the field along with this perfect pit stop was showing that he was on the right track to try to steal this championship away from Juan Pablo Montoya. Now, this seems all well and good, but unfortunately, nearly half the field would actually stay out on the racetrack. Sebastian Saavedra would be in the lead, and Scott Dixon, the first car off pit road, would be down in the 12th position for this restart.
Ready to go back to racing. Let's do it here in the Indy Grand Prix of Sonoma. Sebastian Saavedra leads the field to green. Marco Andretti thought about it. He thinks about it again. Kanaan up the inside of Servia. It's Saavedra up the hill for the first. Andretti, Kanaan, Servia, Bourdais.
Look at Graham Rahal. Rodeo ride. I think he passed one, maybe two cars around the outside.
Looked at this on the start. It looked like Montoya got into the back of somebody at the hairpin and hit somebody. So I don't know if Montoya got some damage to his front wing, but these guys are swarming all over James Jakes.
It wasn't Rahal. Oh boy.
It's Power. That's Will Power.
Power's off.
Keep it running, bud. Keep it running.
Something broken on the car laying in the middle of the track, so he's got a broken front wing.
Unfortunately, the green flag would be short-lived as the full course caution would come out once again. Will Power, who's led pretty much every lap up until that caution, got himself in the back of the pack and found himself in trouble, although his car having relatively minor damage. And I think you'll be kind of surprised who was the one that hit him.
On board with Juan Pablo Montoya. Don't tell me the teammates collide. Surely not. Oh, they do.
What did I tell you?
Oh,
it looked
boy.
like he had damage to that bumper and got tagged and spun around.
Well, I think Montoya didn't know what Power was going to do there, so he sort of left the door open with Philippi there, and then just came across the bow.
The two is, I think it might have damaged Montoya's front wing as well, because a piece of the wing flew off here. As you see right here, boom, see the front wing? Broke the front wing, so that's a problem for Montoya as well.
It's all of a sudden gotten very interesting.
Huge championship implications as the two Penske teammates got together. Juan Pablo Montoya trying to hold on to win this championship ends up making contact with Will Power, damaging his front wing. Now, this wasn't as devastating to Montoya's chances as it could have been due to those split strategies. He was already towards the back half of the field, so they came in to change that wing. Some of those guys that stayed on the first one did come down pit road to do their pit stop, but majority of them did continue to stay out on the racetrack. So Montoya didn't lose as nearly many spots as what could have been if everyone was on the same strategy. Both Graham Rahal and Scott Dixon closed that gap on Juan Pablo Montoya significantly, as this championship battle is about to get a whole lot more interesting.
But all of a sudden, that championship's going to be wide open, so brace yourself. Here we go.
Keep your eye on that red car, the first all-red car you can see. There it is there. It's Scott Dixon. Let's get ready to go back to racing here at Sonoma. Let's do it. Saavedra, Andretti, and Kanaan, they climb the hill first. And watch in the background, the guys who are vying for this championship will be making some pretty slick moves. Already, Dixon tries to work on Gabby Chavez.
And I think Scott Dixon there in the target car only needs to make high percentage moves. Things will come his direction here. He's got to protect the car. If the pass is very high percentage, he'll make it, but he will not take a risk.
On lap 50, the last of the cars that did not pit, Tony Kanaan, would hit pit road during a commercial break, and that would hand Scott Dixon the lead, while Montoya was still down in the 13th spot, desperately trying to make his way through the field, because as they run, Scott Dixon is the current points leader by 20 points, and Scott Dixon got that one bonus point for leading a lap, and there was still plenty of time left for him to try to lead the most laps and score those 2 extra bonus points. Because of Sebastian Saavedra's strategy, it was highly unlikely he would return to the lead, and with Will Power, who had the most laps led at this point in the race, being buried back in traffic behind Montoya, Scott Dixon just had to finish this thing off and hope for a little help from other drivers of holding Montoya back. On lap 62, Scott Dixon, who had a huge lead, would come in to make his final stop of the race, and it would only take one lap for him to cycle back into the lead of the race, as second place Ryan Hunter-Reay would lead one lap before he would pit and Dixon would retake the lead. Just a few laps later though, the one thing that Scott Dixon did not want to see, a full course caution would come out while the broadcast was at a commercial break. Then this would tighten the field right back up.
James Jakes has just taken a wild ride. You see his car down the bottom of the screen there. Obviously the Englishman is okay. And let's show you what will be a pretty frightening ride. Look mid-screen, look to the right, look to the right.
And that does not look like a guy that just lost it under braking. Something went wrong there, Paul.
Yeah, he came on the radio and said he had brake failure, so the car did a hard left-hand turn into the wall, so he was not going to stop, and it just lost control.
Majority of the leaders, including Scott Dixon and pretty much everyone on the same strategy as him, would stay out and he would lead the field back to green. Meanwhile, Juan Pablo Montoya was still down in the 12th spot.
Ready to go. Scott Dixon will lead this field to green. It's the end of the third. Yellow. Let's go. Canaan pops out of the inside right alongside Ryan Briscoe. What a move that was. That's a power move from Tony Canaan on Briscoe.
Our two dark horses, you picked Dixon, I picked Hunter-Reay. 1-2 right now, so let's see what happens.
Roll up your sleeves because we're going to battle here to the finish. This is great stuff here. And what a pass by Canaan. He did it on the outside earlier. Now he went to the inside, and Hunter-Reay gets wide there, exiting turn 5.
Throws a blanket of dust over the rest of the field. Everybody got through fine. Look at Montoya looking racy back there. He does not want to be there. Back in that 11th position, he climbed to 10th. Now doing the chasing, up the hill to the hairpin. Key overtaking point, couldn't quite do it. Oh, the ABC machine there. Oh,
that's
that was Jack Hawksworth.
On Munoz, and Munoz is going to be beached. This will be a yellow.
Another yellow.
The caution would come out for the final time. As you see here, Carlos Munoz gets himself beached on the curb, but on the bright side, that picked up Juan Pablo Montoya a few more spots, and now put Scott Dixon only 6 points ahead of him.
3 Ganassi cars in the top 4 positions. Get ready to go. The championship coming to a close, and we see the green flag at Sonoma. Scott Dixon wants to get away from Ryan Hunter-Reay, get out in some clear space, get away, and consolidate this spot at the top. Montoya, the red and white car, right there, chasing Sebastian Bourdais.
Wow, look at the gap that Dixon put on Hunter-Reay in 2 corners. That is impressive.
He got told, you're good for fuel, go for it to the end. He's on maximum attack.
All Scott Dixon can do now is try to drive away from the pack and finish off this race and get this victory, while Juan Pablo Montoya just had to gain a few more spots to regain that championship lead. But the laps were winding down in a hurry. 9 laps to go and Montoya slightly losing ground to the cars in front of him. It was starting to look like all hope was lost until this happened.
Ray Hall, that defensive inside line. Bourdais thinks about it. Oh! And hits it!
That'll help.
Oh my goodness!
Don't let Sato get by Montoya. So that could be 2 positions. There has to be damage on Bourdais' front wing.
And that could move Montoya to 6. 1 position
and a
from the championship.
And a full course yellow as well.
Looking closely at Bourdais' wing. No full course yellow. Bourdais' wing looks to be intact. I wonder if it was just the nose that just squarely hit the back of Rahal. But remember, will Bourdais get a penalty?
He might get a drive-through.
Yeah, that's clearly an avoidable contact because he was a whole car length back, outside, inside, and then squared him up.
Oh, yeah. I think we're going to see a penalty. I think
way
Montoya
that can't be a penalty.
Montoya moved to 6th.
And if Montoya finishes 6th, we've heard from race control that's under review. They're looking at it as we speak. If Montoya gets to 6th, it still won't be enough because Dixon will win on a count back of victories. They'll be in a tiebreaker situation.
Tell you what, Montoya was lucky that Graham stayed on the brake and didn't roll back into him.
I don't know further. I don't know if Graham stayed on the brake at all. He was rolling. He was looking at Montoya coming by. Wow, look at that. 2 points.
As they run.
With Bourdais still currently on track in front of Montoya, the deficit was 2 points, but on the very next lap, that deficit would double to 4 points as Scott Dixon would clinch the most laps led in the race. And with 6 laps to go, Montoya would catch another break to help him out.
Bourdais off again.
Oh, don't go back on in front of him. Okay. Professionally lets Montoya by. Now Montoya, head down. You have to string together the best 5 laps of your life.
Let's give you the time split as Bourdais serves his penalty. Montoya runs a little wide. Let's give you the time split from Briscoe back to Montoya as they come across the line. And there it is. So, it's 3.4 seconds.
That pass on Bourdais would put Montoya and Dixon in a dead tie for the points lead, but Montoya had to break that tie because Scott Dixon and Juan Pablo Montoya both won 2 races throughout the year, and the first tiebreaker for a tie in points is most wins on the season. If Scott Dixon could finish this one off, that would put Dixon 3 wins to Montoya's 2, giving him the championship. Montoya would close that gap to Ryan Briscoe, but coming to the white flag, Montoya was not yet in a position to make a move on Ryan Briscoe to try to put himself up into that 5th spot to win the championship.
To make sure of this championship, however, that task is getting increasingly harder. 1 more lap left for Scott Dixon and Chip Ganassi. Do you think there's a pretty good reason why he's Ganassi's longest tenured driver? 14 years driving for Chip. And it's this reason why he always delivers.
I'm watching them come out of the carousel. There goes Kanaan. There goes Briscoe. Montoya.
Closer.
Oh, he's going to be close.
It's close. Closing in, getting even closer. So it's going to be the last corner where this happens.
The team will be telling Juan Pablo Montoya, this is it. Give it everything you've got. Go and get that Schmidt-Peterson Honda, and the championship's yours. But time is running out. Scott Dixon into that final corner, and that checkered flag will be waiting.
One last break zone, and it's going to be next to impossible.
Dixon gets back-to-back wins at Sonoma, but we can't give this championship to him just yet. We wait for the rest to come across the line, and Montoya cannot do it. Scott Dixon not only wins in Sonoma, but wins the 2015 championship.
Scott Dixon overcoming odds that were drastically stacked against him, needing a perfect day and absolutely getting that, and driving a perfect race. But that wouldn't be just good enough. He would need a little help from his competitors to finish ahead of Juan Pablo Montoya, and that's exactly what would happen, as he got some big help from his teammates Charlie Kimball and Tony Kanaan, who finished 3rd and 4th respectively, and on a tiebreaker by getting his 3rd win of the year compared to Montoya's 2, Scott Dixon would wrap up his 4th IndyCar championship. As for Juan Pablo Montoya, this had to have been a tough one to swallow. He technically never lost the points lead in terms of points the entire year and did not come away with the championship. He was super consistent throughout the year, but only found victory lane 2 times. And what was real unfortunate for him is he was going up against one of the best. If anyone had to have a perfect day in IndyCar, it was Scott Dixon who can make that happen. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in as always. If this is your first time here, subscribe to my channel for more great IndyCar content just like this. We just recently hit 5,000 subscribers not too long ago, and I activated memberships on the channel. So if you want to support in a greater way, you can now do that. It's totally optional. And as the channel progresses, I'll continue to make that better and better for anyone who chooses to support. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope to see you in my next one. Take care, everyone.